Hello chess friends and welcome to the of Chess channel and welcome back to the Computer Bullet Chess Championship in 2022. So the super final between the two top engines, Stockfish 15 and the Bergh engine is over. We know who is the winner. It's of course the Stockfish engine. Congratulations again to the developers of the beautiful Stockfish engine. But the result was really a wild one. After more than 1600 games, the result was plus 366 for the Stockfish 15 engine, which was really incredible performance when you think about it harder. The Bergh engine is also powerful, really beautiful, sharp tactical chess engine, but Stockfish is still much better, and as I said, it destroyed really the Bergh engine in the super final of bullet chess. So I sorted out now one beautiful game. It had, I think, one of the most beautiful tactical sequences that you see. What I mean about the tactical sequence, it's sort of a forced line that you have to accept. Sometimes you have to accept the tactical sequence. If you don't accept it, then you get destroyed immediately. So you have to play basically the best next move in order to stay in the game. So probably, as I said, in my opinion, it was one of the best tactical sequences of all time. So let's see now first the opening stage, and then we'll come to the most beautiful stage of the game. So here the Stockfish engine played with the white pieces, opened with the move e4. We have e5 by Bergh, knight to f3, knight to c6. After knight to c3, knight to f6 was the pre-arranged line. We have now the 4 knights variation. And okay, after move knight to f6, we have bishop to b5, which is now the Spanish game set up here. We have now the Spanish game, but with 4 knights out. So it's now the 4 knights game, but the so-called Spanish variation. You could also play maybe the Scotch variation by playing the move d4. So here after move bishop to b5, we have here bishop to d6, and it seems so that this could be maybe a mistake, a positional mistake, because many times you don't want to place your bishop in front of this pawn, because still you want to play the move d6 and then develop the light square bishop somewhere maybe to g4. But actually this is the way to go into this game. You have to play the game like this, because you see now why black is playing many times this particular line. For instance, there's also a game between Hare Krishna against Magnus Carlsen. So Magnus Carlsen is also playing, for instance, this line. After move bishop to d6, we have now the move d3, kingside castling a3, not allowing some maybe pinning idea here by bishop to b4. We have now rook to e8, and you see now this bishop will come to f8, and still we would have then protection of the e5 pawn. So bishop takes c6 followed with e5, then would be a protected pawn here. So that's why many times black is playing this move order like this. Develops first the bishop, castles by kingside, and also plays then rook to e8 in order to create some spaces for the bishop on f8. So we have h3, we have bishop to f8, we have bishop to c4, and now h6, not also allowing here the Bergh engine to play bishop to g5, maybe annoying pin, and then knight to d5 could cause many positional problems. So h6, a beautiful prophylactic move here by the Bergh engine. But Stockfish is saying here, okay, you have played already with the move h6, you have already weakened your pawn structure in front of the king. Now I want to attack your king side immediately. Here Stockfish plays already a beautiful flank attack with the move g4. So from this point on, the game is already wild. So here the Bergh engine is saying, okay, you have showed your cards, you're attacking the king side, I will then attack the queen side. I hope that you castle queen side, I hope you castle into my attack. And here comes already a surprise, because the Stockfish engine actually retreated here to a2, and it was a surprise for me, because bishop to b5 is perfectly fine. Although we have to say it from a positional point of view, this makes sense what the Stockfish engine did. You should not always watch just computer revelations. For instance, my Stockfish engine at home suggests that you should take, but actually if you take, then it's very hard to play this game. You cannot castle queenside because already the b file is opened, and I think black could have some fun on the b file, attack your bishop, will play maybe a6, open the v file, and castling the kingside would be also very risky, because you have already played h3 g4 there. You have already weakened the king side by this with this beautiful flank attack. So as I said, it's very hard then to secure the king. So that's why this move bishop to a2 makes sense. Although, as I said, bishop to b5 from a tactical point of view is perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with this move. So bishop to a2, we have b4. So you see the Bergh engine is already there, already attacking the knight on c3. We have a takes b4, knight to b4, and now bishop to b3. So you don't want to lose your light square bishop in an early stage of the game, because it's your most powerful minor piece on the board. So that's why bishop to b3 makes also sense. So we have now d5, and the drag engine, you see, plays really a decent sharp attacking game. It's saying you stayed already very long with your king in the center. It's time now to open the center. So we have here now counterattack g5. So you see both engines are really playing a beautiful sharp attacking way. So here h takes g5, knight to g5, and here bishop to e6. So the dragon engine is controlling now further the d5 square. Stockfish accepts the challenge and simply takes out the light square bishop. We have rook to e6, and you see now Stockfish is continuing the pressure here on this long diagonal. So in the continuation, we have bishop to g5. E takes d5 doesn't make so much sense, because knight from b to d5 will happen. Then after something like queen to f3, we can fix the pawns, we can fix the position in the center of the board by playing the move c6. And I think with these two powerful knights in the center of the board, black could have also a decent game, especially because of the fact that white has now a hard time to secure the king by calcing. Where are you going to calcium? If you calcium kingside, you have already weakened the pawn structure too much here. If you calcium queenside, as we said, b file attack could happen. We can also maybe try some ideas, a5, a4, a3, open a position on the queen side. So many opportunities would be possible, I think, also for black. So it's hard really to play now this middle game stage. So that's why bishop to g5, and the Stockfish engine is actually creating a new pressure around the square d5, because the knight is also controlling the d5 square. Now it's a simple battle around the square. So we have queen to d7, getting out of this tactical mess on the dark square, getting out of the pin. We have a rook to g1, placing the rook well already the king. So now Stockfish hopes to get some kind of an activity on the g file. So we have a5, we have a rook to g3, we have c6, as we said also in the middle game stage, fixing the position simply around the square d5. We have now queen to f3, and here Stockfish is already saying and already announcing maybe a queenside castling move, which is very risky when we think about this art, when you watch now the dynamics in the center of the board. So after move queen to f3, we have bishop to e7, we have now h4. Stockfish continues with the plan here on the king side. We have queen to b7, and now knight to a4. And this was, I think, a very important move, creating a blockade, and never ever allow this file to get open, because if this file gets open, then black could have, as I said, some kind of an attacking opportunity. After move knight to a4, we have now g6, and now queenside castling by Stockfish. So castling queenside is really risky here, but okay, we have to say it's still Stockfish has also some chances by playing maybe rook to h1, then even h5, I think, would be a possibility to open the g file. Now the both of these rooks on the h file and on g file could cause also some tactical problems against black's king. So here king to g7, played by Drang. Drang connects the king more closer to the pawns, because here when the king is on g8, it's a little bit loose, it's a little bit far away from the pawn structure. So now here everything is glued together, at least for a while, for black. So after move king to d7, we have now this idea h5 immediately. We have knight to h5, and this is now the start of this beautiful tactical sequence. So Stockfish plays bishop to e7, and if you don't react correctly, if you play queen to e7, then you lose, of course, the knight. We have here then queen to h5, and then you couldn't take out the queen because of the activity of the rook on the g file. So that's why you have to play rook. Knight takes the rook on g3. Now we have bishop to b5, and now comes a takes b4. We have now again this very cool open a file, and now comes a beautiful tactical shot that Stockfish, of course, saw, knight to c5. But what to do here from black's perspective? The problem is now if you play check here on a2, a1, pardon me, then you get king to d2, and the king escapes from everything, and this is perfectly fine. So that's why a must move here for black is a very cool move, knight to f1, because if you take out the queen now on b7, then you get checkmated. This is the beauty about the move knight to f1, because it cuts off the potential escape route for the king here on d2. So that's why knight to f1. Here in the continuation, we have rook to f1. Now we have rook to f6. You see the tactical sequence is still going on. We have queen to f6. We have king to f6. Now the Stockfish engine takes out the queen, but now with the move rook to a1, Stockfish loses now the rook here on f1. After king to d2, we have rook to f1, and it's now over. The tactical sequence is over. Let's see now what happened, and let's now evaluate this position, because still we have to say it, black has 6 pawns on the board. White is 5 pawns on the board, but white is also both of these pieces as a compensation for the rook, and this should be probably a better position for white. So here in the continuation we have king to e2. We have to attack the rook. You don't want to lose this pawn. If you lose maybe this pawn on f2, then of course the g pawn becomes a pass pawn, and this could be very, very hard to stop. So that's why king to e2 a must move here for white. So rook to a1, e takes d5, we have c takes d5, and now bishop to d5. And now the pawn count is equal. We have 4 pawns for both sides, but I still kind of like more the white's position, because in the near future we will get our pass pawn here. We will create a pass pawn and make some damage here on the queen side. The cool part is that we have, as I said, this f pawn, which is at least holding the position for a while, because we can expect, of course, black to push here the pawns on the king side. So that's why at least this pawn on the f2 square is holding the defensive structure, and also with the support of the bishop, and of course the knight will come into the game. We can defend this position on the king side. So here king to e7 was played. We have bishop to c4, f5, black stuck to this plan, attacking the king side. We have d4, e takes d4. This was a cool move by Stockfish, a temporarily pawn sacrifice just in order to split the pawn storm. So whenever you face a pawn storm, you should stop it. You should make it immobile. This is impossible here to make. What I mean about it, that you make it immobile, you should maybe create a pawn structure where the pawns are fixed when black cannot move the pawn. So this here is impossible, because you have only one pawn that is battling against these 3 pawns. So splitting the pawn chain is a huge defensive element that you have to know in pawn endgames. Now you see after move e takes d4, black does have now 3 pawns that are connected. Now white is defending with 1 pawn against 2 pawns. Of course this pawn is taken, you have lost a pawn, but it's a weak pawn, and it can be attacked in the near future, of course, by the minor pieces of white. So as I said, it was a really important moment of this endgame stage, this move d4. So here in the continuation we have knight to c5, we have king to d6, knight to d3, we have g5, and now king to f3. We have a rook to a8, trying maybe to get this kind of a route, also maybe to get the rook somehow behind these pawns, and then push the pawns on the king side further. We have king to g2, we have rook to b8, b3, fixing everything. So you see how white keeps the pieces compact, keeps them glued together, not allowing here some loose pawns, some loose pieces on the board, not allowing some tactical ideas here by black. So rook to b6, knight to e1, we have king to e7, king to g3, we have king to f6, and now knight to d3. Now Stockfish is trying to grab maybe this pawn, maybe grab this pawn. So now the knight is the most mobile piece on the board. So king to b7, king to f3, we have rook to e7, king to g2, king to f6, king to g3, and now after king to e7 we have now this very important move, because now we can expect the knight to come on f3, where it could attack both of these pawns. So we have rook to c7, knight to f3, king to f6, and finally Stockfish grabs the first pawn, which is now very important. Now the main strategical goal here is to maybe trade somehow this 2 pawns, and then create a passer here on the b file with the support of this 2 minor pieces. So after move knight takes d4, we have king to e5, knight to f3, king to f6, knight to e1, again trying to search for new opportunities for the knight here, maybe on the square d3. We have f4, we have king to g2, rook to c6, and now knight to d3. We have rook to b6, protecting of course the pawn on b4. We have f3, fixing now everything. You see how Stockfish keeps all of these pawns on light squares, because then the pawns can be protected always by the light square bishop, and then, as we said, the knight is the most mobile piece here in this endgame stage, and then we can just use a search for new opportunities for the knight. So the knight will find good squares on the board, but we have to keep all of our pawns on the board. So we have king to e7, we have knight to c5, we have knight to a6 attacking the pawn, we have rook to b6 again protecting the pawn, we have bishop to d3, we have king to e6, king to h3, now marching towards the square g4, where we can attack of course both of these pawns here on g5 and on f4. King to f6, knight to c7, threatening also the fork on d5. So we have rook to b7, knight to d5 check, we have king to e6, and now the king comes on a very important square. This was now, I think, sort of a moment that releases simply the pressure in white's game. This is now a winning move, because if you take, of course, then you get this one, bishop to e4, the rook is hanging, and then afterwards we grab all of these pawns, it's game over. So after move, when the king comes on g4, this is now an optimal square for the king, where the king is attacking both of these pieces. So it's simply game over here for black. So king to b8, we have bishop to e4, we have king to e5, king takes g5, rook to g8. Okay, you have your fun, you have a couple of checks, but nothing special. King to d4, we have king to g5, attacking now also the pawn on f4. We have king to b7, and now a very cool move, c3 here by Stockfish. So c3 is a very nice tactical shot, because after b takes c3, knight to c3, notice of course that also the rook is hanging, so you don't have time. Even if you take, of course, here, then knight to d5 is going to happen still. We can take out the pawn on c5, so nothing dramatically changed. So even if you try to pin it, we can still take. This is not good, then still we can play king to g5, and this is winning simply for white with this extra pawn. So after move knight to c3, we have a rook to g7, king to f6, rook to g8, now knight to d5 again, attacking the pawn on f4. We have a rook to e8, we have knight to e7, because there was maybe this threat of rook takes e4, f takes e4, and then this could be maybe an annoying pass pawn. So you should also watch out for this kind of a tactic here. So after rook to e8, knight to e7, rook to f8, king to e6, we have king to c5, b4, deflecting the king simply from the action, because if you take, then you get here knight to g6, and we can take out then afterwards the pawn. And what we gained here is, of course, that the king is too far away from the action, and then it's a winning game again for white. So after move b4, we have king to b5, bishop to d3, we have king to a4, b5, pushing the pawn further, b6, king to c3, bishop to e4, we have king to d2, now pushing the pawn further. Now after knight to c6, it's of course game over. King to e1, we have king to e5, king to f2, promotion, we have a check, but nothing special. The queen is on the board. Stockfish simply maneuvered here the queen to b2, created a check. We have king to e3, threatening checkmate on e2, so that's why we have king to d2, queen takes d2, king to f1, and queen to f2 was a beautiful checkmate. So really beautiful game. We have seen this 4 knights game, the Spanish variation, then we have seen really a nice tactical sequence, and we have seen, I think, a very instructive endgame that you played probably many times in your life. Maybe not the same position, but it's similar structure, where you have maybe 2 minor pieces against the rook, and then you don't know what to do. I think you have seen a very beautiful approach. So first Stockfish fixed everything, and then danced with the knight all over the board, tried to search for new opportunities, then took some pawns and created a pass pawn, and basically it was game over. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. Again, congratulations to the developers of the Stockfish engine. They're really doing great work. Every of the tournament that is played now, whatever it is, if it is a bullet championship, rapid chess championship, classical time format chess championship, every tournament is won by the Stockfish engine, which is really a great accomplishment and huge thing for all of us. So okay, if you want to see more very cool computer chess games like this, check out my commented chess games played by computer series, with some more games played by Stockfish, Alpha Zero, Lila Zero, Dragon Engine, and many more. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.